I never meant to stay on the line. My daughter had put me on hold while she talked to the bank. Something about adjusting the payment schedule, she'd said. Just a second, Mom. She always said just a second. I'd learned over the years that her seconds could stretch into minutes, sometimes longer, so I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and went back to rinsing the colander of strawberries I'd picked up at the farmer's market that morning. That's when I heard it. Not her voice first. My son-in-law's. Low and unhurried, the way men speak when they think no one important is listening. She has no idea what she's agreeing to. You know that, right? And then my daughter, my Gwen, laughing, bright and unbothered, a sound I hadn't heard from her in months when she was actually talking to me. She just wants to feel useful. Give her a form and she'll sign it. She trusts me. A pause. Then my son-in-law again. That's almost too easy. The strawberry in my hand hit the bottom of the colander. I didn't move to pick it up. I stood at the sink with the water still running, the afternoon light coming in sideways through the window above the faucet, and I listened to my daughter laugh again at something he said next, something I didn't fully catch because the sound of my own heartbeat had gotten suddenly louder. I reached over and pressed the red button on the phone. I turned off the faucet. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I had bought alone after my divorce. The house I had repainted myself room by room over 3 summers. The house where Gwen had grown up, where I taught her to bake pie crust on that very counter, where I'd helped her with college applications at the kitchen table that still had a scratch from the corner of her acceptance letter envelope. I stood there and I did not cry. I just listened to the quiet and let it tell me what I already knew. After my divorce from Kenneth, people expected me to fall apart. I was 61, 28 years of marriage behind me, a house to sell, a future to reconstruct from scratch. My sister kept calling to check on me. My friends brought casseroles. My doctor asked how I was sleeping. I was sleeping fine. I was sleeping better, actually, than I had in years. What people didn't understand was that I had been quietly preparing for that ending for a long time. Kenneth and I had grown into 2 people who were polite to each other in the way that strangers on an airplane are polite, careful, cordial, and fundamentally uninterested in what the other person was going home to. We had a daughter we both loved, a house we both maintained, and very little else holding the center. When it ended, I grieved the marriage we could have had, not the one we did. I sold the big house in Naperville, bought a smaller one in a neighborhood with wide sidewalks and old oaks, and spent the first winter alone, learning how to be entirely my own person again. I made soup from scratch. I joined a book club. I took a watercolor class on Thursday evenings and was terrible at it and didn't care. Gwen was 29 by then, married to Philip, living 40 minutes north in a house they'd stretched themselves thin to afford. She called often in those first months. Worried, she said. Just checking in, she said. I appreciated it. I told her I was fine and I meant it, and eventually she believed me. What I didn't notice at the time was when the checking in shifted. It's subtle, the way that kind of thing changes. 1 month she's calling because she loves you. The next she's calling because she needs something. And if you're not paying close attention, if you're still glowing from the relief of your own reinvention, you can miss the exact moment the dynamic turns. I missed it. She mentioned first that they were looking to refinance. Interest rates, she explained, investment opportunity, equity leverage, words that blurred together when she said them fast enough. Philip had a business idea, a consulting firm he'd been incubating for 2 years. They needed a co-signer for a line of credit. Just a formality, Mom. Your credit score is so much stronger than ours right now. It won't cost you anything. I signed. I told myself that's what mothers did, that I was helping her build something, that the money I had sitting in my retirement accounts wasn't doing her any good as a number on a screen. 3 months later, there was another form, then a deferment agreement. Then something Philip emailed over on a Saturday morning labeled simply Bridge Document with a highlighted signature line and a note that said no rush, but soon would be great. I signed that one too, without reading it carefully. I was on my way to my watercolor class. I preferred not to think too hard about what I was agreeing to. I preferred to believe that trust between a mother and daughter didn't require fine print. The night after I heard the phone call, I didn't do anything dramatic. I made myself dinner: salmon, roasted asparagus, half a glass of white wine. I washed the dishes. I let my cat Fig onto my lap while I watched the news. I went to bed at a reasonable hour and lay on my back in the dark and thought very carefully about what I was going to do. By morning, I had a list. The filing cabinet in my home office held 4 years of documents. I had always kept things organized. Kenneth used to say I was the only person he knew who color-coded her taxes, but I had not recently looked back through the stack of papers Gwen and Philip had accumulated in their own folder. The folder was thick, thicker than I remembered. I made coffee and sat down at my desk. The first document I recognized: the co-signed mortgage refinance from 2 years ago. Fine. The second was the business line of credit. Also familiar, more or less. The third gave me pause. It was a personal guarantee agreement tied to something called Linvale Group LLC. I had never heard of Linvale Group. My name was listed as guarantor. The amount, $85,000, issued 11 months ago. Below my signature, which was unmistakably mine, the same looping L I'd used for 63 years, was Philip's. I set that one aside. I kept reading. By the time I reached the bottom of the folder, I had a separate stack of 7 documents I didn't fully remember signing, couldn't account for, and couldn't explain. 2 of them listed me as sole financial guarantor on ventures I'd never heard discussed. One of them appeared to have transferred limited power of attorney over my investment accounts to Philip for, as the document put it, administrative efficiency during the refinancing period. The refinancing period had ended 18 months ago. I sat for a long time with Fig in my lap and the stack of papers on the desk in front of me. Then I picked up my phone, not to call Gwen, and looked up the number for my financial advisor, Helen, who I'd been with since Kenneth and I separated. Her office opened at 8:30. It was 8:42. She answered on the second ring. "Helen," I said, "I need to come in today. I have some paperwork I need you to look at with me." A pause. She knew my voice well enough. "Is this urgent?" "I think it might be," I said. Yes. Helen's office had the kind of calm that came from good carpeting and years of practice delivering difficult news gently. She was thorough and methodical. And when I slid the stack across her desk, she put on her reading glasses without saying a word and went through each document slowly. I watched her face. It didn't do anything alarming, but it also didn't stay neutral the way I'd hoped. "This one?" she said, tapping the Linvale Group agreement. "Do you remember the circumstances of signing this?" "Vaguely," I said. "Gwen brought it over one evening. She said it was related to Philip's consulting firm. She said it was routine." "It's not routine." Helen set it flat on the desk. "This is a personal guarantee on an unsecured business loan. If Linvale Group defaults, and from what I can find in a quick search, this entity has no public filings, you're on the hook for the full amount, $85,000, plus accrued interest." She tapped the other 2 unfamiliar documents. "And these here, this is what concerns me more. This is a limited power of attorney, which you apparently signed, giving your son-in-law discretionary authority over 3 of your brokerage accounts." I kept my voice even. "Can that be revoked?" "Yes. Today, if you'd like." She looked at me over her glasses. "Vera, do you want to tell me what happened?" So I told her. I told her about the phone call, the laughter, the 11 months of accumulated paper I'd signed, in good faith and not examined closely enough. I told her about the bridge document on a Saturday morning. I told her about the watercolor class. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk. "You haven't done anything wrong, but we need to move quickly." She opened her laptop. "I'm going to pull up every account tied to your name or your social security number, all of them. And then I want you to call an attorney. Do you have a recommendation?" She was already typing. "I do. His name is Douglas Park. He handles financial elder abuse cases specifically. He's methodical. He's discreet. She glanced up. And he wins. I called Douglas Park from the parking lot of Helen's building, standing in the October wind with my coat pulled tight. He answered himself, which surprised me. I had expected an assistant. "Mr. Park," I said, "my name is Vera Hutchins. Helen Marsh referred me. I believe my son-in-law has been using my credit and my signature to build a financial structure I wasn't aware of, and I need help understanding my exposure and my options." Silence for 2 seconds. "Can you come in tomorrow morning?" he asked. 8 o'clock, I said. "I'll make it work." That night, Gwen called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a cheerful message about Thanksgiving plans, whether I'd be doing the turkey or should they bring it. Did I want her to coordinate with my sister? Her voice was easy and warm, and she sounded exactly like my daughter. I saved the message, noted the timestamp, and went to bed. Douglas Park's office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, clean-lined and uncluttered. He was younger than I'd expected, early 40s, with the particular stillness of someone who had heard worse than whatever you were about to tell him and not flinched. I spread the documents on his conference table. He read them quietly, the way Helen had, without performing surprise. Then he organized them into 3 groups with his own system of markers and set down his pen. "The power of attorney is the most immediate issue," he said. "That needs to be revoked today. We'll file the revocation with every institution holding accounts under your name." He touched the Linvale agreement. "This is more complex. Your liability here is real, but there are grounds to challenge it on the basis of misrepresentation, depending on what was communicated to you at the time of signing." She told me it was routine paperwork for the refinancing. Did she explain what Linvale Group was? No. Did you have independent counsel review it before signing? No. He nodded. Not with judgment. With the clinical calm of someone mapping terrain. That works in your favor. Material misrepresentation, if we can document the communication surrounding that signing, creates a viable challenge. He looked at me steadily. "I also want you to understand something. What you're describing, and I'm not making a determination yet, I need to review everything thoroughly, but what you're describing has characteristics of elder financial abuse. That's a legal designation, not just a moral one. There are remedies available to you that go beyond simply revoking documents." I sat with that for a moment. "All right," I said. "All right, you want to proceed? All right, I understand." I straightened the stack on my side of the table. "And yes, I want to proceed." I spent the next 9 days doing what I should have done for the past 4 years, reading every piece of paper that had my name on it. Douglas's paralegal sent me a comprehensive account audit. Helen's office forwarded statements I hadn't looked at in over a year. I printed everything, organized it by date and institution, and built a timeline on the dining room table that stretched from one end to the other, with Fig carefully avoiding the papers like he understood their importance. There were 11 documents total that concerned Douglas. Of those, 4 had my name attached to financial obligations I had not knowingly incurred. The Linvale Group alone had made 3 draws against the guarantee, totaling $62,000 in disbursements, all routed to an account in Philip's name. I wrote it down. All of it. Dates, amounts, the exact language of each agreement. On the 10th day, Gwen called again. This time, I answered. "Hey, Mom." Warm as always. I was starting to get worried. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, busy with some paperwork. "Oh, anything I can help with?" And something in the brightness of her offer, too quick, too easy, made my chest go tight for just a moment. "I'll manage," I said. "How are the kids?" We talked for 11 minutes about nothing consequential. She didn't mention Philip's business. I didn't mention Douglas Park. When we hung up, I wrote down the time and date in the notebook I'd been keeping. 3 days later, Philip called. He never called me directly. In 4 years of marriage to my daughter, I could count on one hand the times he had called me without Gwen also on the line. "Vera," he said, relaxed and practiced, "I wanted to touch base about the Linvale account. There's an adjustment coming up, and I just wanted to give you a heads up so you're not surprised by anything on your end. What kind of adjustment? I asked. Just a payment restructure. Standard. Nothing you need to do anything about. I'll handle the paperwork. I just wanted to keep you in the loop. I appreciate that, I said carefully. I've actually been reviewing the Linvale documents myself. I had a few questions. A half-second of quiet. Just a fraction, barely enough to notice. Sure, yeah, of course. What questions? I prefer to go through them in person, I said. Why don't the three of us sit down sometime this week? You, me, and Gwen. Absolutely. Back to smooth. We can do Sunday. Come for lunch. I'll be there, I said. What I didn't mention was that Douglas Park would also be there, and that I had spent the previous afternoon signing a new estate plan that removed Philip from any position of trust or authority, updated my beneficiaries entirely, and placed the majority of my assets into a trust that would take effect immediately, and that neither Gwen nor Philip had the legal standing to contest. Sunday came with thin November sun, and the smell of something Gwen had been cooking since morning. She opened the door with a dish towel over her shoulder and kissed my cheek and the domesticity of it. The warm kitchen, the sound of a football game in the other room, the familiar smell of her house hit me with something I hadn't prepared for. Not hesitation. Just grief. The clean, specific grief of seeing clearly. Philip was in the kitchen when I came in, setting out plates with the practiced ease of someone who thought this was a normal Sunday. He smiled at me. He had always had a good smile. I set my bag on the chair by the door. Before we eat, I said, I'd like to go through some paperwork. Gwen's expression flickered. Mom, can't we just… It won't take long. I opened my bag and laid the documents on their kitchen island, one by one. The Linvale guarantee. The unauthorized POA. The 3 brokerage disbursements. The timeline I built on my dining room table, now condensed to a single clean page. Philip looked at them without touching them. I've revoked the power of attorney, I said. As of 10 days ago, the accounts have been frozen pending review, and Douglas Park, my attorney, has filed a formal complaint with the state financial regulator citing potential elder financial abuse. The room went very quiet. Gwen spoke first. Mom. Her voice was careful. We were going to pay everything back. It was temporary. I know that's how it felt, I said. This is a misunderstanding, Philip said. His voice was still controlled, but the ease had gone out of it. You agreed to all of this. I signed documents that were misrepresented to me, I said. That's Douglas Park's position. That's also the position of the state financial regulator. I looked at both of them. I'm not here to fight. I'm here because you're still my daughter, and you deserve to hear this from me directly, not from a letter. Gwen sat down on one of the kitchen stools. She was quiet for a long moment. What does this mean? She asked. It means we aren't financially entangled anymore, I said. The Linvale obligation is being challenged. The disbursements will need to be addressed. Douglas will be in touch with whatever you need to respond to. The rest is between you and the process. Philip pushed back from the counter. You're destroying our marriage over… I'm not destroying anything, I said. I kept my voice even. I had practiced this. You made choices that I didn't know about and wouldn't have agreed to. I'm correcting my exposure. That's all. He walked out of the kitchen. I heard the back door. Gwen didn't look at me for a long time. When she did, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. I didn't think it would go this far. I know, I said. Did you know? About all of it. I thought about that question honestly. I knew something was wrong before I let myself admit it. I said, That's on me too. She looked down at the counter. I picked up my bag. I love you, I said. That part isn't changing. But I'm not signing anything anymore without understanding every word of it first, and I want to apologize for that. I drove home with the windows down even though it was cold. The air felt clarifying. I needed that more than warmth. The complaint moved faster than Douglas had predicted. Within 3 weeks, the state regulator had opened a formal inquiry into Linvale Group LLC. Two of Philip's other business partners, apparently facing similar paperwork irregularities, had filed their own complaints. The entity dissolved quietly within the month. No criminal charges were filed. The line between misrepresentation and fraud is, Douglas explained, narrow and difficult to prosecute, but the financial exposure was neutralized, and the disbursements were settled through a negotiated repayment plan that Philip's attorney arranged without a trial. Gwen called me 6 weeks after Sunday. She didn't mention Philip. She didn't explain or defend. She asked if she could come for coffee that Saturday, just her, and I said yes. We sat at the kitchen table where I had taught her to make pie crust, and she wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "I think I've been pretending not to see things for a long time." I didn't answer right away. I waited, the way you do when someone is still making their way to something true. "He kept telling me it was temporary," she said, "that we'd fix it before it became real. I think I wanted to believe that enough that I stopped asking questions." "I know that feeling," I said. She looked up. "I signed things without reading them because I didn't want to be the kind of mother who made everything complicated," I said. "I wanted to be easy to love. That's its own kind of willful blindness." We sat with that for a while. Outside, the neighbor's kid was raking leaves badly, leaving long stripes of untouched yard between each pass. Fig jumped onto the windowsill and watched with deep professional skepticism. "Are you and Philip?" I started. "I don't know yet," she said, quietly. Honestly, it was the most honest thing she'd said to me in a long time. "Okay," I said. I refilled her coffee. She stayed for 2 hours. We talked about other things, her job, my watercolor class, whether I was going to try the new Thai place that opened on Elm. We didn't solve anything, but we were 2 people in a room, talking like they actually knew each other, and that was more than I'd had in longer than I wanted to count. I have a new binder on the shelf above my desk. Douglas helped me label it. Everything is in there. The trust documents, the updated estate plan, the revocation filings, the settlement summary. Helen's office sends me quarterly statements now that I actually read, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee. Fig on the chair beside me, going through every line. I am not a person who came to this with perfect clarity. I made choices out of loneliness and the particular ache of wanting to be needed by the child you raised. I signed things I shouldn't have. I chose, more than once, not to look. But I also stopped. Helen told me, the last time I was in her office, that most people wait until something catastrophic happens before they start paying attention to their own financial lives. I had caught this before catastrophic. The accounts were recoverable. The legal exposure was manageable. The relationships were still tentatively alive. That's not a small thing. I know that. My new estate plan is clean and deliberate. The trust is structured. My attorney reviews anything before I sign it now. Not because I can't read, but because accountability to someone else keeps me honest about my own impulses. The impulse to be generous without boundaries. The impulse to be easy rather than careful. The impulse to love someone into not hurting you. You can't love anyone into not hurting you. I know that now. What you can do is make sure that when it happens, your name is only on what you chose. I went back to the watercolor class this fall. The instructor remembered me from 2 years ago and said she was glad I'd come back. I'm still not good at it. The trees look like clouds and the clouds look like suggestions, but I like the way the hour feels. The quiet concentration, the smell of the pigment, the discipline of trying to translate what you see into something another person could recognize. I'm working on a painting of my backyard. The old oak in the corner, the fence line, the way the light comes in at 4 o'clock in November, it doesn't look like much yet. But I'm not done with it. I used to think that being a good mother meant making yourself easy to love, asking fewer questions, signing the form before the coffee went cold, not being the kind of woman who made everything complicated. What I didn't understand, and I'm not sure anyone told me this plainly enough, is that making yourself easy to love can also make you easy to take advantage of. Those two things can live in the same person at the same time, and the people who love you most are often the ones best positioned to know exactly where the line is between the two. Gwen knew. I think she knew for a long time. And I think she chose the way I chose, not to look too closely at what she was allowing to happen. That's the part people don't want to talk about when they tell stories like mine. It's not just that someone did something wrong. It's that the conditions for it were built slowly, out of perfectly ordinary material. Loneliness, the desire to be needed, the discomfort of asking hard questions of the people you love. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to be deceived. You drift into it, one small accommodation at a time, until the version of yourself who would have said no feels like someone you used to know. What I understand now, sitting on the other side of it, is that intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. I am not an unintelligent woman. I ran a household, raised a daughter, managed the transition out of a long marriage with my finances and my dignity intact. I could read a document if I chose to. I chose, more than once, not to. That choice wasn't stupidity. It was a kind of moral avoidance, a decision to protect the feeling of trust rather than the fact of it. The consequence of that was real and measurable. $62,000 drawn against my name. Accounts I didn't know were linked to my credit. A power of attorney I had no memory of meaning to grant. These weren't abstract harms. They had numbers attached to them. But here's what I've come to believe, sitting at my kitchen table with Fig on the chair beside me and the updated binder on the shelf above my desk. The consequences came, eventually, for everyone. Not because the universe was keeping score. Because choices compound. Philip's choices compounded into a formal investigation and a dissolved LLC and a reputation that now precedes him in ways he didn't plan for. Gwen's choice to look away is something she's still working out the cost of, quietly, in ways I'm not privy to. And my choice to finally stop accommodating, to read the documents, call the attorney, revoke the forms, meant that the damage stopped where it did. Recoverable, manageable, not catastrophic. That's what I mean when I say that what you do catches up with you. Not as punishment, as consequence. The world isn't dramatic about it. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps running the math. What I want to carry forward, and what I hope, if you're hearing this, you take with you too, is this. Protecting yourself is not a failure of love. It is, in fact, the only way to love sustainably. You cannot give from a place you've allowed to be emptied. You cannot trust people into trustworthiness. What you can do is decide, clearly and without apology, what your name will and won't be attached to. And then hold that line. I'm still working on the painting of my backyard. The old oak, the fence line, the 4 o'clock light. It doesn't look like much yet, but I know what I'm trying to say with it. I'm still here, and I'm the one holding the brush.